Secret Agent 666 by Dr. Richard B Spence is a serious read. It is not a huge book, not by any means, and not at all hard to read, but it is literally packed with detail, to the point that I intend to reread it with a pad and pencil to take notes. As I said, it's an easy read if your interest is casual, but it opens so many threads of investigation that you could easily end up down an internet research rabbit hole, or thumbing through other books if you don't like the internet so much. Seriously, this book is so packed with information that there is no way that I can give you a fair synopsis of it in this kind of review. The good news is that Spence gives many interviews, and searching on YouTube, or possibly BitChute, should net anyone a good selection to listen to. I would advise anyone unsure of their interest in the subject to listen to Spence talking before deciding to buy. He can tell you the gist of his research in an hour or so talk. However, the book contains far more detail than he can cover in that kind of scenario. He also talks about other interesting things, such as Riley Acer spies and who truly funded the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Search YouTube or BitChute for the title, and something should come up. The author, Richard B Spence, is an academic, a tenured professor in history at the University of Idaho. He specializes in Russian history, as well as in the role of secret intelligence and the occult in history. He has written several other books and teaches with the great courses. His academic background shows in this work, which is packed with source notes and allows you to check up on what he says and why he is saying it. He's not this guy, who has an R in the end of his name and, being a more famous political type, keeps ending up in my search bar, no doubt putting me on some list or other. Anyway, this book is a nice change from the regular treatment of Aleister Crowley, which tend towards the sensational, either by lionizing him as a visionary or by rather creepy celebration of his exploits, sexual, pharmacological, and magical. Crowley is without doubt an influential figure, inspiring artists, musicians, and murderers, and he is often seen as a forerunner of the 1960s cultural and sexual revolution. Now, back to the review. It's a very good overview of the life and activities, in particular the secret intelligence activities, of Aleister Crowley, so-called wickedest man in the world, dubbed the 73rd most important man in British history by a 2002 BBC poll and TV series, which I have not seen. He was the subject of a song by rock legend Ozzy Osbourne, and even made an appearance on the cover of a Beatles record, Dr. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Band, and has for years been linked to various major cults, crimes, and secret intelligence services. Crowley was, perhaps most notably, head of, but not founder of, the OTO, a secret society or possibly sex cult that is still active and recruiting the rich and powerful, and is, I believe, mentioned in the TV show Strange Angel, a drama about the magician and rocket pioneer Jack Parsons, who was also linked to the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. Crowley's teachings were claimed as inspiration for the life and work of West Memphis 3 killer Damien Echols, who was championed by his friend Johnny Depp, who worked to free him from death row. The podcasts and the books of William Ramsey and the website William Ramsey Investigates cover this subject well. Also, the leader of a Welsh suburban sex abuse cult, Colin Bately, was jailed for his decades-long abuse of cult members, and was also alleged to be a devotee of Crowley. There is a video available on YouTube documenting the life of the daughter of one of the cult members. I will link to it in the description. In many ways, Crowley's activities do tend to foreshadow the Nexium cult, which is, as you can see, why Crowley is still relevant today. However, it should be noted that Spence, showing no personal prejudice for or against Crowley, treats him as just another historical figure, a historical figure who moved again and again across the tapestry of events in the 20th century, playing hidden and mysterious roles in many of them. Spence is always clear when he has proof that events transpired as stated, or when he is speaking on evidence, or when he is making educated speculation. I wish that more historical writers would emulate this clarity. He paints a very interesting background canvas of the time period that Crowley was active. I personally had no idea, for example, that there was still an active Jacobite movement in those days, nor the extent that Freemasonry and secret cults were an open part of the British and European establishment's political and civil service scene. I did know that there had been a rise in mysticism and magical societies, but that they were taken so seriously and used to create links across national interests and boundaries was totally news to me. Crowley's early life is covered, his time at university and as a mountaineer, and Spence provides good evidence that from these early days, Crowley was working for the intelligence services. He covers Crowley's historical activities in more depth than his magical ones, though one cannot really separate one from the other, and the reader is shown a good deal about Crowley's pro-German activities in America during World War I. The links to the famous sinking of the Lusitania, the passenger liner whose destruction precipitated the United States' entrance into World War I, come thick and fast, hence the image on the cover. We see the documentary evidence that he was working for the British at the time that he was writing German propaganda. Spence goes into considerable detail as to Crowley's personal interactions and contacts in America, and we see the web of his life overlaid with other interesting characters. As I have said earlier, you can go off on a dozen internet research rabbit holes following the people that he knew or associated with. I rather liked it. Spence changed my understanding of this time period a lot. We also hear of Crowley's post-war life, of how he was thrown out of fascist Italy as a suspected spy after the death of one of his disciples. I did hear that this so-called Abbey of Thelema became an Airbnb, but I couldn't find evidence of that with a quick internet search, so take it with a pinch of salt. Interestingly, this abbey was alleged to have been visited years later by Alfred Kinsey, author of Sexual Behavior and the Human Male, 1948, and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, 1953. His work is directly credited with inspiring major changes in sodomy and sex crimes laws, both in the US and possibly other nations. Kinsey is alleged to have been looking for access to secret diaries of Crowley, the secret sex diaries of Crowley, rather, either in order to further his own research or for personal titillation. Kinsey and his predilections is covered in the documentary Kinsey's Pedophiles by the great Tim Tate, which is still available on YouTube, at least for now, and well worth a watch. I shall link in the description. Spence writes a good deal about Crowley's use of psychoactive drugs, often on unsuspecting dinner guests, and of his possible powers of suggestion. Spence links him to the World War II intelligence branch responsible for the interrogation of captured prisoners. There is even evidence tentatively suggesting that he may have drugged and interrogated Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess, who was captured after a so-called peace flight to England during the war. Hess, who spent the rest of his life in prison, may have suffered from mental illness and behaved oddly in captivity. Okay, score. Ease of reading is 3. It's easy, but dense. Unless you're already a Crowley scholar, you will want to take your time with it. Engagement value, 5. If you have an interest in Crowley, this is your book. If you have an interest in the turn of the century and World War I society, this is your book. Fun value, 2 to 3. Interesting, but unless reading about a perverted freak's exploits and how he constantly ruined other people's lives is fun to you, then I have to lower that rating, obviously. Language use, 4. This is a pretty easy book to follow. Tight wording, and it's very businesslike. Reread value is 5, or 5 plus even. If you have an interest in this kind of thing, you will want to get a notepad and you will want to go through this book again. All in all, well worth the price. For a history buff, it's a different overview of that period. For a conspiracist, it's great research. For someone who likes biographies, it's pretty good too. Go buy it.